Good afternoon, everyone. My name's Lujain. I'm a fourth year dietetic student from the University of Nottingham, and I've created a resource related to nutrition and dementia, which I'm hoping will be useful for you. So I just wanted to start by quickly discussing some of the common eating and drinking problems people living with dementia may have. So one of the most common ones might be taste changes. Some people may have a greater preference for really sweet foods or foods that have a really strong or spiced flavour. There can be a lack of recognition of food items or recognizing non-food items as food. They may forget if they've eaten or how to eat. There may be a decreased ability to recognize hunger, thirst, and feeling full. They may not be able to communicate their likes and dislikes. They may forget how to use cutlery or find cutlery difficult to use, and that can be linked to a loss of independence. They may become more reliant on someone else purchasing their food and preparing their food for them, and again, that's linked to a loss of independence. Texture and consistency of food and drinks can become inappropriate. And I just want to highlight that coughing at meal and drink times, chewing continuously, or repeat chest infections can all be signs of swallowing problems. So it's really important to refer to a speech and language therapist as soon as possible for the safety of the person living with dementia. And again, I just want to highlight that some of the advice and tips in this presentation may not be suitable for someone who's having swallowing difficulties because their food and fluid would need to have a modified texture as advised by a speech and language therapist. So if we could start off with some practical tips with dementia, and it's all about trying to make the food as visible as possible. So there are simple things we can do, like trying to keep the room as lit as possible, using plain plates in a colour that contrasts the food on the table, and primary coloured plates and cups, so those in red, yellow and blue may be recognised better, particularly as dementia progresses. Trying to keep the table setting as simple as possible, so avoiding clutter and unnecessary items like vases, and avoiding patterned table coverings, and also trying to avoid distractions and noise during meal times, like not having the TV on, because that can all support concentration on the meal. If the person wears hearing aids, dentures, or glasses, make sure they wear them during the meal, again, because that can support with concentration. If they're struggling to grip cutlery and cups, adapted versions with wide or chunky handles are available, and an occupational therapist can support with this. So here I've just put some images to support with some of the tips from the previous slides. On the right, you can see a spoon with an adapted handle, and that can support someone feeding themselves more independently. And on the left, you can see some cups and plates in those primary colours, and that's all about making the food as visible as possible. So some other practical tips include allowing plenty of times for the meal, but just be aware that if someone's taking longer to eat, their food can become cold and unpleasant, and so they might not want to finish their food. And so to overcome this, try providing half a portion at a time or one course at a time to try and keep the food warm and pleasant and increase the likelihood of them finishing the meal. If those really sweet or strong foods are preferred, you can experiment with lots of different flavours using sugar, honey, seasoning, spices, sauces like hot sauce, cranberry sauce, onion and garlic, herbs. They can all make the flavours really stand out. As likes and dislikes change, offer a wide variety of foods and be flexible. And childhood favourites linked to older memories can be appreciated, so offer foods linked to those. And if those sweet foods are preferred, they can be offered as part of a balanced diet. So you can offer naturally sweet vegetables like carrots, sweet corn, turnips, and sweet potatoes, and then enhance the flavour further using things like cranberry sauce, jam, honey, and so on. If food is refused, the key thing is don't panic. Try and offer the food again in 30 minutes to an hour. But if food refusal persists, seek advice from a GP just to rule out alternative causes. So moving on to hydration, you should aim for about 6 to 8 glasses of fluids per day. Good advice is try and have a drink next to the person at all times in visible view. But be aware that prompting to drink is likely to be required, and you could set up things like alarms to make it easier. You may find that using a handled cup or something like a straw might be easier to drink from. Offer a range of hot or cold drinks, but be aware that with those hot drinks, supervision may be required just for the person's safety. Try and make drinking a social activity, so drink together. Again, that can encourage to meet fluid requirements. If they're really not keen on water, try adding something like a flavoured squash. And I would advise go for something with added vitamin C in it. If they're really struggling to meet those 6 to 8 glasses of fluid per day, you can try incorporating high fluid foods in the diet. So things like jellies, soups, milk puddings, ice lollies, and watermelon. And again, I just want to stress that some of this advice is not suitable for someone with a swallowing difficulty. And just ensure that you check hydration levels through urine. So the darker the urine, the more dehydrated someone is. And other signs include a dry mouth, dry skin, and headaches. So what if someone loses weight with dementia? So the first thing I would suggest is speak to a GP just to rule out alternative causes and aim for weekly weights. So monitor weight changes. If you don't have skills, there are other things you can do to monitor weight change. So things like loose fitting dentures, loose fitting clothing are all key signs of weight loss. Really, the main advice with losing weight is to go for the little and often approach, particularly if appetite is reduced. So instead of going for those 3 large meals a day, offer 5 to 6 smaller meals, including snacks in the day. Always use full fat milk, and you can fortify this further with a milk powder because that increases the energy and the protein content. So as a general rule, we say use 4 tablespoons of the milk powder for 1 pint of milk, and then use that throughout the day with the pudding, drinks, and cereal. Add things like extra butter, cheese, and double cream to foods that can really enhance the flavour as well as increasing the protein and energy content in a really easy way. Spread jam, honey, marmalade, butter, margarine, peanut butter thickly on foods, and you can add more than one of those food items on one food as well. Go for milky based desserts, so things like rice pudding with jam, porridge with fruits, and offer nourishing drinks throughout the day. So what we mean by those is like those milk based drinks. So again, use full fat milk to make up those drinks. And these drinks include Ovaltine, Horlicks, milkshakes, and hot chocolate. Again, you can increase the energy and protein content further by adding milk powder. And for things like milkshakes, you can make those at home, buy them from supermarkets. You can buy milkshake powder as well, and then add the powdered milk in there. I would always suggest going for a milkshake powder that has extra nutrients and vitamins added into there. So something like Nesquik could be good. And then just be aware that finger foods may be preferred over hot meals, particularly if the person's easily distracted, they're constantly on the move, or they're finding cutlery quite difficult to use. So I've just made a list together of some finger foods that might be enjoyed. So something like tea cakes with butter is quite good, crumpets with honey and jam or butter. But be aware, savoury foods may also be enjoyed. So something like biscuits or crackers with hummus and cheese cream. Samosas, small sausage rolls are often quite popular. Something like sliced pizza, sandwiches. For the sandwich filling, I'd always recommend going for a filling that's high in protein and calories. So something like egg mayonnaise, tuna mayonnaise, cheese and butter, peanut butter. Meat or fish paste is a really high protein source. And moving on to constipation. So constipation may occur, and this can reduce appetite and increase confusion. So the key recommendation is to increase fibre intake, because that can add bulk to stools and make them easier to pass. So there are simple changes that can be made, like going from white bread to brown bread, going for wholemeal cereals like Weetabix, Shreddies, and porridge, adding extra fruit to porridge, which is also a high fibre food, adding fruit to yogurt, dessert, cereal, having fruit as a snack. Again, that can support meeting the 5 a day and support meeting the fibre requirements. Adding vegetables to meals or having vegetables on the sides. But the key thing is with the fruit and vegetables is try and keep the skins on because that's where most of the fibre is found. Beans and pulses also are high in fibre. So add those to salads, soup, pasta and rice. And the key thing with the fibre is to try and add that gradually and also increase fluid intake as well. Because if someone's not used to having a lot of fibre in their diet and that's suddenly increased, it can cause side effects like discomfort and excess wind. If there's no improvement in constipation, obtain further guidance from a GP. And finally, just going on to mouth care, I think it's quite important to consider this because it can really impact food intake, and oral hygiene can maximise the taste from food. So some people living with dementia may have a reduction in saliva production, and that can cause a dry mouth. There can also be an increased risk of tooth decay and gum disease, and these can all impact food intake. So ensure that teeth are brushed twice a day using fluoride toothpaste. If dentures are worn, ensure those are cleaned twice a day and removed overnight, and ensure dentures actually fit properly, and seek further guidance from a dentist if that's not the case. Also continue to have regular dental checks because some people living with dementia may not be able to communicate that they are living in pain. Be aware that drinks labelled sugar-free may still be damaging to teeth if they're acidic. Try and limit those sugary foods. So we talked earlier about going for naturally sweet vegetables. If the person has a dry mouth, encourage drinking fluid throughout the day. So encouraging that drink next to them at all times. Avoid really dry foods, and you can make the food easier to swallow by adding gravy and sauces to the meal. Keep the mouth clean. So rinse the mouth after eating with some water or mouthwash. And again, I just want to re-highlight that some of this advice is not suitable for someone with a swallowing difficulty, so seek support from a speech and language therapist. So I just want to finish by pointing out some resources where you can gain further information and get some more reading. And thank you all for listening.